p.m. on the 28th of January 2026. You are, of course, looking at, and we're going to do 15 minutes of monitoring the moon for anything that may transit between us and it. It's 3:37. While we look at the image a little bit, I'm going to explain the last time out with the moon. I assumed the moon wasn't going to shift very much in terms of its position in the sky, and I set everything up mechanically on the mount after clearing out the model so that the moon would transit directly across the screen without shifting either to the left, which is south, or to the north, which is right. Meanwhile, this is the east from the sky, but at the west of the moon, and this is the west of the sky and east of the moon. So, because the moon was tracking pretty much straight along this center line here, and I assumed that it would, I made slight adjustments to both right ascension and declination. And in doing so, the last time out, which was 4 or 5 days ago, I was getting really excellent centering on all deep sky studies of that evening. And the last time I was out, I did only northerly studies so that I could get ahead of the curve on blockages due to the roof tribes. The sky looks pretty good now, but the GEOS imagery did not look good for clouds coming in off the Pacific Ocean. I am hoping that I'll have a chance to do the NGC 1350 to 1399 series tonight, which will incorporate only a single study that was north of the celestial equator in Taurus or Perseus. The view we're getting of the moon right now is actually a 50 millimeter view because I removed a cap instead of taking off the entire, I would call it a lens cap, but this is actually a mirror cap at the end of the F4 Fast New 150 millimeter L Quattro. So if we're actually literally operating only at 50 millimeters, we're only getting about 2 to maybe 2.5 arc seconds of resolution on the moon. However, it's looking quite nice for that degree of resolution. We are operating at 150x. I believe we're at 100% e-zoom, and that is the case. I'm hoping we're centered precisely on Sinus Medi, but the moon does gyrate a little bit, so you never know the very center of the moon is the very center of the moon, but there is a part of the moon called Sinus Medi, which is right in the center of the sphere from the point of view of Earth. Interesting, watch how the pointer ends up circulating occasionally. That's probably because we're operating simultaneously the Microsoft snipping tool to capture imagery, as well as capturing the imagery using a UDP port connector, 3.0 protocol. So it's operating at a fairly high rate of data transfer. This is an exposure time of about 5,000 microseconds with a gain of 251 using the planetary imaging software associated with the ASI Studio tool that you can download when you get a ZWO imager. So I haven't seen anything yet transiting, but we're about 4 minutes and 30 seconds in. You'll notice we're starting to get a little bit of clipping to the west. So there is a little bit of driftage on the part of the moon to the west, when in fact it should be drifting slightly to the east because it progresses over a 28-day cycle 360 degrees in its orbit. Its orbit was normative because the Earth's tilted, etc., so it's a bit off. But if you divide 360 by 28, you'll get something like 12 degrees of sky a night. And of course, the amount of actual drift varies depending upon how far south or north of the celestial equator it is in terms of raw degrees. Okay, we're now about 5 minutes and 30 seconds in, and we still have yet to see anything obvious transit. The presented looks like maybe a 9 to 10 day approaching gibbous moon. But I do want to read in, and I may post this up anyway, perhaps with a little bit of solidography, because I want to capture my current settings. Oh, for some reason, the handheld Gemini 2 is saying there had been it had recovered after a power fail. Now, I tend to leave the scope powered up from use to use, on perhaps the mistaken belief that electronics last longer if you don't cycle the power. So let me tell you what that was just something I noticed. If I go to align, so if I go back to the menu and I press menu in Gemini 2, I go to align and I go to a selection called model parameters. Let me tell you what I've got. I've got an HA, or an hour angle index error, or horary. No, forget it. I'm trying to remember what HA represents. Horary hour, that's it, azimuth, index error of only minus 1425. Now, anytime I get less than 3000, I'm happy with any of these parameters. I have a deck index error of minus 588. I have a polar axis azimuth error of minus 1228. And a polar axis elevation error of minus 1264. There is no error in the non-perpendicularity of each of these, nor is there any error due to counterweight flexion. So we're now 7 minutes and 30 seconds in, halfway through this 15-minute video with the idea of capturing something on the moon. Now, in terms of generalities, we all know, anybody who's looked at the moon, that you have seas. For instance, Mare Crisium. You have one ocean of I believe it's Procellarum. You have other seas that looks like this lobster-shaped creature here, which is Tranquillitatus, Serenitatus, and a couple more. You have some mountain ranges that are basically terminating this particular sea here. And you have a mountain range that terminates near the crater Plato, which is actually a walled plain because after the crater was formed, it filled with lava that probably occurred early on in the history of the moon when the moon was under gravitational influence and it was still quite liquid magma at its core. Right? You have various rays, which you can see here, various craters that have luminous cores that are the source of the rays. You have other craters, and many of these are to the south, where many craters have formed compared to the north. So you can always tell the south of the moon versus the north by the amount of impact craters. The south also has the largest impact craters on the moon that are visible. Within some craters, you have mountain peaks. There are also things called rills, which are declivities in the lunar surface. I'm not seeing anything here because you probably need higher resolution. You have craters of various sizes ranging from maybe 200 miles to far less than a single mile. And I believe at 1 arcsecond resolution, you might be able to resolve a crater down to maybe a mile or a kilometer in diameter. I'd have to do some research. Now, there's a certain amount of what is called libation to the east and west of the moon because the moon does not have a fixed orbit around the Earth. It varies from about 225,000 to 240,000 miles distant, so therefore it is a slightly elliptical orbit. That orbit, by the way, is much more elliptical than our own Earth around the Sun, which only varies by about 1 million miles and averages about 92.5 to 93 million miles away from the photosphere of the Sun. Okay, so there is a larger walled plain, similar to Plato, farther to this would be, of course, the west of the moon or east of our view. It's called Grimaldi, and I can remember that name because there is a famous character called Grimaldi in Babylon 5, which I followed as a series. I think it was put out around the millennial change era. So it's a worthwhile one to watch if you wish to. It was kind of about a story about a United Nations that was established in space, where various species from the galaxy itself would go in order to be able to converse and exchange information and possibly from that some kind of trade between the worlds, etc. It eventually evolved to a battleground between the forces of light and darkness, between spidery-looking devils, dark devils, and luminous angels. And the battle that occurred is the dark, spidery-looking things wanted people to do whatever they damn well please and would often seduce them into behaviors. And the white angels were always trying to force the various sentient species that were traveling between the stars to do good. And either way, it's kind of a nice metaphor for humanity because humanities have agency, and agency is making your own choices and, of course, suffering the consequences, which the angelic beings, the luminous beings, didn't want humanity to suffer because of the consequences, and the dark, shadowy, spidery-looking creatures kind of wanted people to do destructive things because they didn't want the human beings to take over and become the primary, as I recall, population of the galaxy. Both the angels of light and of the darkness basically had established themselves much earlier in the history of the Milky Way galaxy and may, who knows, very well have come from elsewhere. And there was a final showdown in the last season. I think it was season 6, which was quite abbreviated because apparently they were running out of funds and they had to deal with it. Okay, so anyway, I don't know how I got to that from Babylon 5, from the moon to Babylon 5. Oh yes, it was Grimaldi, one of the characters in the series, and his particular officiality was to investigate crimes and other kinds of activities occurring aboard the space station Babylon 5, where the various representatives from different parts of the galaxy turned up for their intragalactic conferences. Now, of course, those of you who have followed the UFO phenomena have been exposed to the idea there's a galactic federation, and that the galactic federation, there are good beings from other worlds who are observing human evolution on the planet. And of course, they're relatively benevolent, but they keep the hands-offness of the Star Trek Universal Directive, which is non-interference. Meanwhile, we have supposedly gray aliens that do bad things, supposedly doing things like animal dissection and vivisection and exsanguination. So we're supposedly in the midst of a very similar conflict, but we are not privy to it because the deep state in various countries like the US, Russia, and China are not going to release this information to the general public for whatever reason, and I am not criticizing it. I am just stating the possibility that this may be the case. We are now at 14 minutes and 15 minutes, 1 second, and I have not seen anything unusual traversing the face of the moon, whether near to us or far off on the moon itself, or in the space in between. And with that, I am going to say, hopefully, the sky is going to hold for tonight, so I can do the NGC 1350 to 1399 series, focusing primarily on studies that are below the celestial equator and integrate it with those that I've already captured, which was only one. I believe it was NGC 1383. That was above the celestial equator because I am concerned about too much sidereal progress and delays caused by weather. All right, we're almost 16 minutes in. I've given you my observations and plans for the evening. God may laugh, and I'm going to say carpe noctem.